"And that, my dear future Nobel Prize winners," Miss Penelope Blackwood announced with a flourish, casually tossing a perfectly measured amount of potassium into a beaker of water, "is why we always, respect the periodic table's alkali metals." The resulting explosion, while perfectly controlled, still managed to startle a few freshmen in the front row. Standing amidst the dissipating smoke, her lab coat somehow remaining pristinely white, Miss Blackwood adjusted her safety goggles with a smirk. "Pop quiz. Who can tell me why I'm not currently picking pieces of beaker out of my face?" A forest of hands shot up, though notably none belonged to the still shell-shocked front row students. "Mr. Chen," she nodded toward her favorite senior student aide, "because you calculated the exact amount needed for theatrical effect without actual danger, and you positioned the blast shield at precisely the correct angle to direct the force upward." "Michael, Chem Whiz," Chen answered, matching her smirk with one of his own. "Show off," she muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "But correct, though you forgot to mention the reinforced glass I specially ordered after last semester's incident." The class collectively shuddered at the memory of the great thermite demonstration of 23. As her students began packing up their bags, Miss Blackwood's hand unconsciously drifted to the small device clipped to her belt. What she'd told the administration was a weather monitoring system. It had started giving off unusual readings about an hour ago, but she'd been too engrossed in terrorizing her, teaching her students to check it properly. "Remember to read Chapter 7 on oxidation states," she called out as the bell rang. "And yes, I will know if you don't. I always know." She delivered the last line with just enough ominous undertone to make several students pause mid-step. Once the room cleared, she finally unclipped the device, frowning at its display. The readings were unlike anything she'd seen since that classified incident in Paraguay that officially never happened, the one that had led to her early retirement from a certain government agency that also officially didn't exist. "Miss B," Michael's voice broke through her concentration. She hadn't even noticed he'd stayed behind. "The atmospheric pressure readings are off the charts, aren't they?" She raised an eyebrow at him. Sometimes the boy was too observant for his own good. "And how exactly would you know what this device measures, Mr. Chen?" "Well," he grinned, "normal weather monitors don't usually have military-grade encryption or emit slight radiation signatures in the wavelength typically associated with quantum entanglement communications. Remind me to stop letting you borrow my extra credit physics books," she sighed, but her fond smile betrayed her pride in his observation skills. The smile faded as she studied the readings more closely. But yes, the readings are concerning. Through the classroom window, she could see students milling about during their lunch break in the courtyard below. Everything looked normal, almost too normal. The kind of normal that, in her experience, usually preceded things going spectacularly wrong. "Michael," she said, her voice taking on an edge he'd never heard before, "be a dear and check if the ventilation system modifications we did for that air quality study last semester are still operational. The ones that definitely weren't designed to be able to rapidly deploy aerosolized compounds throughout the entire school?" he asked innocently. "Those would be the ones," she replied, already moving toward the supply closet, the one with 3 separate biometric locks that the school board somehow never questioned. "And while you're at it, verify that the emergency protocols we established for the student safety drill program are still in place." "You mean the ones that can seal off every entrance and exit within 30 seconds? "Exactly." She paused, hand hovering over the closet's control panel. "You know, most teachers' aides just grade papers and make copies. Most teachers' aides don't work for former chemical warfare specialists who decided to take up teaching as a retirement plan," he countered. "Allegedly former," she corrected automatically, "and allegedly chemical warfare, and allegedly retirement." She finally turned to face him fully, her usually sardonic expression deadly serious. "Michael, if what I'm reading is correct, things are about to get very interesting. Are you sure you want to—" The device on her belt suddenly emitted a high-pitched whine, its display flashing red. Above them, the sky darkened unnaturally fast. "Well," Miss Blackwood said, her lips curling into what could only be described as a predatory smile, "looks like today's lesson plan just got a lot more practical." The massive warship materialized above Lincoln Heights Secondary School with all the subtlety of a rhinoceros in a china shop. Its hull, a hideous shade of purple that Miss Blackwood would later describe as like someone threw up grape soda on a brutalist architecture project, blocked out the sun entirely. "Oh, good," she muttered, peering through her classroom window, and here I was worried today might be boring. Below, in the courtyard, hundreds of students stood frozen, phones pointed skyward, because apparently even an alien invasion couldn't break Generation Z's instinct to document everything. The ship's external speakers crackled to life, emitting a sound like a garbage disposal trying to digest a fork. "Citizens of Earth Education Facility," boomed a voice that managed to somehow sound both menacing and nasally congested. "I am Supreme Commander Crixethal of the mighty Vazxian Empire." "Well, someone's compensating for something," Miss Blackwood remarked dryly to Michael, who was already typing commands into the school's modified security system. $10 says he monologues about their superior intelligence next. "We have studied your pathetic species and determined that your educational institutions are the heart of your civilization's development. By targeting these facilities, we shall crush your spirits and demonstrate our intellectual supremacy." "Do I have to pay you now, or can I write you a check later?" Michael asked without looking up from his tablet. The ship's underside began to open, revealing what appeared to be deployment pods. Panic finally broke out among the students below, though Miss Blackwood noted with pride that several of her AP chemistry students were already heading for the designated emergency shelters she'd casually mentioned throughout the semester. "Your primitive minds cannot comprehend the glory of the Vazxian Empire," Crixethal continued, clearly enjoying the sound of his own voice. "We have conquered 17 star systems by targeting their youth centers. Their broken spirits serve as testament to our—" "Oh my God, shut up," Miss Blackwood groaned, pulling what looked suspiciously like a military-grade communications jammer from her desk drawer. With a few quick adjustments, she cut off the alien commander mid-rant. In the sudden silence, she could hear the school's principal, Mr. Thompson, attempting to maintain order over the PA system. "Students, please proceed calmly to your designated evacuation points. This is not a drill, though I really, really wish it was. Also, whoever's still trying to order DoorDash to the school right now, please stop." "Status report?" Miss Blackwood asked, already changing into what she'd told curious students was her emergency preparedness gear, but was actually a lightweight tactical suit designed to withstand chemical and biological weapons. "Security systems online," Michael replied. "Ventilation system primed and ready. I've activated the quantum-encrypted emergency beacon you definitely didn't install last summer, and the autonomous defense drones are in position." "Those were supposed to be for the robotics club," she reminded him with mock sternness. "Yeah, most robotics clubs don't build drones with military-grade targeting systems." The first deployment pod crashed through the school's roof, followed by several others. From within emerged tall, spindly aliens in environmental suits that made them look like praying mantises designed by a committee with poor taste. Their weapons, which resembled organic ray guns, were pointed menacingly at the fleeing students. Through the ship's now restored speakers, Crixethal's voice rang out again. "Behold, primitive learners, the Vazxian Empire has chosen your facility as the first to fall. Your species' pathetic devotion to education shall be your—" "Is he still talking?" Miss Blackwood interrupted, this time broadcasting through the school's PA system. "Listen, Crixie whatever, some of us are trying to teach here. Also, pro tip, if you're going to invade a school, maybe don't announce your entire strategy to everyone within earshot." There was a moment of startled silence before Crixethal responded, his voice containing notably more spite. "Who dares address the Supreme Commander with such disrespect?" "Just a humble chemistry teacher," she replied sweetly. "Though I should warn you, our last school inspection gave us an F in susceptibility to alien invasion and an A+ in creative uses of household chemicals." Through the window she could see more Vazxian soldiers emerging from their pods, their movements precise and practiced. They were clearly experienced in this type of operation, which only made their choice of target more infuriating to her. "You know what really gets me?" she said to Michael, who was busy sealing off various sections of the school according to their pre-arranged plan. Of all the strategic targets they could have chosen, military bases, government facilities, infrastructure, they went after schools. They specifically developed a strategy around traumatizing children. That does seem unnecessarily evil, Michael agreed, his usually cheerful face hardening. Vazxian tactical doctrine is beyond your comprehension, Crixathul boomed. By targeting educational facilities, we break the spirit of resistance before it can form. 17 worlds have fallen to this strategy. You shall be the 18th. Miss Blackwood's expression shifted from annoyed to dangerous. You know what? I think it's time for a pop quiz. She began inputting commands into her device. Subject: what happens when you underestimate a chemistry teacher with a grudge and access to way too many dangerous chemicals? All units commence the cleansing, Crixathul ordered. Show these primitives the futility of resistance. Michael, Miss Blackwood said calmly, activate Protocol Mendeleev. With pleasure, Miss B. As alien troops began their systematic sweep of the school building, Miss Blackwood calmly pulled up the building's schematics on her tablet. You know, Michael, this reminds me of a little incident in Paraguay. Well, allegedly Paraguay, allegedly incident. Is this going to be like the time you allegedly weaponized cleaning supplies against that drug cartel that allegedly tried to take over your last school? Michael asked, fingers flying across his own device as he activated their carefully planned defensive measures. Oh no, much worse, she smiled, the kind of smile that had once made hardened Special Forces operators take involuntary steps backward. That was just improvisation. This, she gestured to the school around them, this is art. Asterisk 5 years earlier, asterisk. And you're absolutely sure you want to retire here? Director Hamilton had asked, looking incredulously at the employment application in front of him. You were our best chemical warfare specialist. The things you did in Belgrade alone. That's classified, Penelope Blackwood had interrupted cheerfully. And yes, I'm sure, teaching chemistry to teenagers? It's practically the same job, just with less international incidents. Usually. You do realize that normal chemistry teachers don't typically have experience in creating compounds that can melt through tank armor. Then they're not very good chemistry teachers, are they? Asterisk present day asterisk. Section C sealed, Michael reported, interrupting her reminiscence. The aliens are currently discovering that the door locks I installed during that student council project aren't exactly standard issue. Excellent. Miss Blackwood pulled up another screen, this one showing the building's ventilation system, her pride and joy. Over 5 years, she'd gradually modified it under the guise of various school improvement projects, environmental studies, and one memorable mold prevention initiative that had actually been a cover for installing gas-tight seals throughout the entire network. You know, she mused, watching red dots representing alien troops move through the building, most people would call it paranoid, to spend 5 years turning a high school into a fortress capable of repelling an invasion. Most people haven't read your personnel file that I absolutely didn't hack into last semester, Michael replied. You did what now? Nothing. Look, aliens. She narrowed her eyes at him but turned back to her preparations. Speaking of my allegedly classified background, want to know something funny? When I requested this posting, I specifically chose a school with good ventilation infrastructure. The board thought I was just really concerned about air quality. Through the security feeds, they watched as Vazxian soldiers moved through the halls with military precision, checking classrooms and securing corridors. Their environmental suits suggested they'd done their homework about Earth's atmosphere being potentially harmful to their physiology. That was their first mistake, Miss Blackwood noted. Always research the target thoroughly. For instance, I bet they don't know that every air vent in this building can be independently controlled, or that I've spent years stockpiling enough chemical compounds to make the Geneva Convention need a lie-down. Is that why you kept requisitioning extra storage space for the chemistry department? The board thought I was just really enthusiastic about science education. She paused, watching as a group of aliens passed directly under one of her specially modified vents. Which, to be fair, I am. I just have a somewhat broader definition of education than most. Michael glanced up from his tablet. You know, when I figured out who you really were last year, I thought you'd mind more. Please, she scoffed, the fact that you managed to decrypt those files proves you're exactly the kind of student aid I need, though we really should talk about your tendency to hack classified databases someday. Says the woman who turned a public high school into a chemical weapons platform. Allegedly, she corrected automatically, and technically, according to the school budget, everything I installed is just advanced educational equipment. Their banter was interrupted by Crixethul's voice booming through the halls again. Your pitiful defenses cannot stop the might of the Vazxian Empire. Surrender now, and why won't these doors open? Should we tell him about the mathematically derived quantum encryption algorithms I helped you install during computer club? Michael asked innocently. Nah, let him figure it out, although Miss Blackwood's smile turned predatory as she watched the aliens basically doing exactly what she'd predicted they would. I do think it's time for a practical demonstration of some advanced chemistry concepts. How about a little lesson on the effects of Earth-based compounds on alien biological systems? She began typing rapidly, bringing up the chemical deployment interface she'd disguised as a climate control system. You know, Michael, the funny thing about targeting schools, sometimes the teachers bite back. Miss B, Michael said, looking at his own screen, they've just reached the main trap point. Perfect, she cracked her knuckles dramatically. Time to show these aliens why I had a higher body count than most small armies before I decided to go into education. Allegedly, Michael added helpfully. Kid, you're going to go far in life, assuming we survive the next 10 minutes. With your prep work, please, these aliens don't stand a chance. The door to Miss Blackwood's classroom exploded inward with a theatrical flash of plasma energy. Through the settling dust strode Commander Crixethul himself, his environmental suit more ornate than his soldiers, and somehow even more aesthetically offensive. Ah, you must be the loudmouth educator, he sneered, his translator, making his voice sound like a cheese grater arguing with a dial-up modem. I expected someone more impressive. Miss Blackwood didn't look up from her desk where she appeared to be grading papers. You're getting chalk dust all over my floor. Do you have any idea how hard it is to get the maintenance department to clean in here? Your insolence is noted, primitive instructor, Crixethul declared, his soldiers filing into the room with weapons raised. But we have conquered far more impressive institutions than this. What do you call it, high school? She hummed, marking a particularly egregious answer with red pen. Quick question. Those environmental suits of yours, they're rated for known toxic substances, right? Our protection is beyond your comprehension. We have conquered 17... Yes, 17 worlds, heard you the first dozen times. She finally looked up, pushing her glasses up her nose. But you know what I find interesting? You specifically target schools, places of learning, which means you've never actually faced anyone who really knows what they're doing. Behind her desk, Michael was trying very hard not to smile as his tablet showed the ventilation system's readiness indicators turning green one by one. Your species' arrogance will be your downfall, Crixethul declared. We have studied your primitive defensive capabilities thoroughly. Did you, though? Miss Blackwood stood, stretching casually. Because I'm curious, did your research happen to cover, let's say, the improvised synthesis of fluorine-based compounds using common classroom chemicals? The alien commander's posture shifted slightly. What? Or perhaps, she continued, walking around her desk with her hands clasped behind her back like she was giving a lecture, the potential applications of various halogenated organic compounds when properly aerosolized? No. How about the effects of concentrated hydrofluoric acid on various types of protective materials? Your attempts at psychological warfare are pathetic, Crixethul scoffed, though his soldiers were starting to glance at each other uncertainly. Oh, that wasn't psychological warfare, that was just making conversation. She perched on the edge of her desk. Though speaking of warfare, fun fact, before I became a teacher, I held the record for most creative use of household chemicals in an anti-personnel capacity. The incident report used the phrase, "Dear God, why?" 7 times. Enough, Crixethul raised his weapon. Your primitive threats cannot... By the way, she interrupted, examining her nails, have you noticed that slight tingling sensation yet? The one that started about 30 seconds ago when you stepped into my classroom. The alien commander froze. Several of his soldiers began examining their suits in panic. See, the thing about targeting schools, Miss Blackwood continued cheerfully. Sometimes you run into teachers who've spent years turning their classrooms into elaborate death traps, just in case. For educational purposes, of course. What have you done? Crixethul demanded, his voice losing some of its bombastic quality. Well, remember when you so rudely blew up my door? That triggered the release of a particularly nasty little compound I cooked up last summer. Right now it's eating through your environmental suits at the molecular level. Don't worry though, it'll take about another minute before you actually notice the breaches. Impossible. But the commander was now frantically checking his suit's integrity readings. Oh, and that's just my classroom. Want to know what I did to the rest of the school? Her smile would have made a shark feel inadequate. Michael, why don't you give our guests a quick rundown of today's lesson plan? Gladly, Miss B. Michael cleared his throat. The cafeteria is currently flooding with a gas that turns into acid when it contacts non-Earth-based metals. The gym is filled with a nerve agent that only affects beings with triple helix DNA structures, which, according to the files you broadcast when you arrived, is your species' exact genetic structure. The library, Miss Blackwood added, is particularly fun. I use the ventilation system there to distribute a compound that specifically targets the molecular structure of your environmental suit's filter systems. It's like a tiny drill, but chemical. You're bluffing, Crixathul said, but his voice had risen several octaves. The swimming pool has been converted into what I like to call spicy death water, she continued as if he hadn't spoken. The hallways are gradually filling with the paralytic gas that I originally designed to take down a rogue mechanized division in, well, that's still classified, actually. Several of the alien soldiers were now actively backing toward the door. But my personal favorite, she stood up straight, all pretense of casualness dropping away, the computer lab. See, I had a lot of free time last summer, and I got to thinking, what if I could create a compound that specifically targets the materials used in advanced alien technology? Something that would, I don't know, turn all that fancy equipment into the chemical equivalent of wet tissue paper. As if on cue, one of the soldiers' weapons literally dissolved in his hands. That's impossible, Crixathul screeched. Our technology is superior in every way. Your technology, Miss Blackwood corrected, was designed to resist known weapons and compounds, but you made one crucial mistake. You attacked a school. More specifically, you attacked my school, where I've had 5 years to experiment with creating things that technically don't exist yet. Through the windows, they could see more soldiers running from the building, many of their suits beginning to smoke or dissolve. Should we tell them about the courtyard? Michael asked innocently. Oh yes, the courtyard. Miss Blackwood's smile widened. Where all the runoff from my various systems is creating some really fascinating chemical reactions. Did you know that when you mix certain compounds I've distributed throughout the school, they create an exponentially expanding reaction that... She was cut off by the sound of screaming as several soldiers outside discovered exactly what she was about to describe. You're insane, Crixathul stammered, his suit's integrity warning lights now flashing frantically. No, she corrected him. I'm a chemistry teacher with a grudge and a really well-equipped lab. She glanced at her watch. Oh, and by the way, that tingling sensation I mentioned earlier, it's about to get much more interesting in 3, 2... The alien commander's suit began to smoke. Would you like to know what's happening to your suit's molecular structure right now? She asked brightly. I'd be happy to explain the chemistry involved. I am a teacher after all. You know what the beautiful thing about chemistry is? Miss Blackwood mused, watching as Crixathul and his remaining soldiers frantically tried to seal their deteriorating environmental suits. It's all about transformation, breaking things down to their basic elements, kind of like what's happening to your supposedly superior technology right now. Retreat, Crixathul screamed into his communications device. All units fall back to the ship. Activate emergency protocols. Oh, about your ship, Michael chimed in, showing them his tablet's display. Remember those weather monitoring devices Miss B installed on the roof last semester? They're actually chemical dispersal units. Your ship's hull is currently experiencing some interesting molecular changes. Through the windows, they could see the massive warship's purple surface beginning to bubble and corrode. Escape pods were launching in panic, many of them dissolving before they could get far. This is impossible. Crixathul's voice had lost all of its earlier pompous authority. Our defenses were designed to withstand any known chemical weapon. Known being the operative word there, buddy, Miss Blackwood typed a final command into her system. But see, when you give a former chemical warfare specialist 5 years of free time, a fully equipped lab, and a budget that the school board really should have questioned more closely, well, let's just say I've invented some fun new compounds. The school's PA system crackled to life with automated warnings. Attention, Protocol Mendeleev fully activated. All chemical defense systems engaged. Have a nice day. You attacked a school, Miss Blackwood said, her voice turning cold. You specifically chose to target children. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences? The alien commander's suit was now visibly disintegrating. We have conquered 17 worlds this way. And that might have worked when you were facing regular schools. She walked closer, looking down at him as his legs gave out. But you had the profound misfortune of attacking one where the chemistry teacher spent 20 years developing weapons that gave the Geneva Convention nightmares before she decided to teach. Through her security feeds, she could see the chaos unfolding throughout the building. Alien soldiers were collapsing as their suits failed. Others were trapped in corridors where her specially designed compounds had turned the air into something that their filtration systems had no hope of handling. Should I activate the courtyard fountains? Michael asked, his fingers hovering over his tablet. You know, the ones we filled with that catalyst that makes all your other compounds react exponentially faster. Why not? She shrugged. It's a teaching moment. Let's demonstrate the concept of cascade reactions. The fountains burst to life, spraying a fine mist that immediately began interacting with the other chemicals already in the air. The effect on the fleeing aliens was immediate and dramatic. Fun fact, Miss Blackwood announced to the increasingly desperate Crixethal, I once wrote a thesis on combining seemingly harmless compounds to create catastrophic chain reactions. The review board had to take a mental health day after reading it. The alien commander tried to crawl toward the door, his once impressive suit now hanging in dissolving tatters. Please, mercy. Mercy? She raised an eyebrow. Like the mercy you showed to the 17 worlds where you terrorized children? Besides, she checked her watch, we haven't even gotten to the best part yet. As if on cue, the remains of the alien warship began to make an ominous creaking sound. That would be the special surprise I prepared for your ship's engine core, she explained cheerfully. A lovely little compound that's currently turning your power systems into something resembling spicy jelly. You might want to order your crew to abandon ship. Well, the ones that can still move. Crixethal managed to activate his emergency beacon. All units, full retreat. Abandon planet. Oh, and one more thing, Miss Blackwood added. You might want to warn the rest of your species. Earth schools are officially off-limits, unless, of course, they want to find out what other chemistry teachers have been cooking up in their spare time. The alien ship's hull finally gave way completely, collapsing in on itself in a spectacular display of chemical-induced destruction. The few escape pods that had managed to launch intact were rapidly retreating into the upper atmosphere. Well, she dusted off her hands, I'd say that's a wrap on today's practical demonstration. Michael, make a note. Alien invasion successfully repelled. Environmental cleanup may be required. School board meeting will be interesting. Already drafting the incident report, he replied. Though I'm not sure there's a proper form for used experimental chemical weapons to defeat alien invasion during lunch period. Just file it under extracurricular activities. She walked to the window, watching the last traces of the alien ship dissolve into harmless compounds. You know what the real lesson is here? Don't attack schools. That and always check your target's faculty credentials. She smiled as emergency services began arriving, looking thoroughly confused by the scene. I wonder if this will count toward my continuing education credits. In the distance, they could hear Mr. Thompson on the PA system again. Attention students and staff, the alien invasion has been neutralized, apparently. Thanks to Miss Blackwood's unique teaching methods, classes will resume tomorrow, assuming the EPA gives us clearance, and yes, this will be on the final exam. Think they'll try attacking another school? Michael asked, already helping her begin the chemical containment protocols. After this, she laughed, I doubt it, but if they do... She patted her desk drawer full of classified chemical formulas. I've got a few more lessons planned. Now, help me write up today's lab report. I'm thinking of calling it Why Aliens Should Really Check Teacher Credentials Before Attacking Schools, a case study in applied chemistry. As they began the cleanup process, Miss Blackwood couldn't help but smile. Somewhere out there, a Vazxian ship was limping home with a very important message. Earth schools were not the soft targets they'd imagined, and more importantly, they'd learned a crucial lesson that 17 other worlds hadn't had the chance to teach them. Never, ever underestimate a chemistry teacher with a dark past and access to a well-funded lab. Oh, and Michael, she added as an afterthought, you're definitely getting extra credit for this.